Hello and welcome. I'm so grateful you're here tonight, settling in with an open mind and a curious heart. Whether you're winding down before sleep, finding a quiet moment to think, or simply exploring ideas that have been tugging at your consciousness, I want you to know that what we're about to explore together matters. You see, there's something happening right now in the digital landscape, across social media and self-help communities worldwide, that's been reshaping how millions of people think about reality, possibility, and the power of their own minds. It's a beautiful idea on the surface, wrapped in the language of science, dressed up in quantum terminology. But beneath that attractive packaging lies something far more troubling, a fundamental distortion of both physics and human potential that I think we need to look at together, calmly and clearly. The promise is seductive. You've likely heard it before, that your thoughts, your consciousness, your focused intention can literally reshape reality through quantum mechanics. That by lowering your entropy, by removing negative thoughts and emotions, you can shift probabilities in the universe itself. That the observer effect proves consciousness creates reality. That quantum entanglement means your mind is non-locally connected to all things. That if you want something badly enough and visualize it clearly enough, the quantum field itself will rearrange to bring it to you. These ideas are everywhere right now. They're in best-selling books, viral TikTok videos, expensive seminars charging thousands of dollars, and podcasts with millions of listeners. They sound scientific, they sound profound, they sound possible. And because they sound possible, because they're repeated so often by people who sound authoritative and confident, millions of people are organizing their lives around them, spending money, time, and emotional energy trying to manifest their desires through quantum principles that, well, don't actually work the way they're being described. I'm not here tonight to tell you that your thoughts don't matter. They do, genuinely. Authentic psychological mechanisms, real neurological processes, well-documented placebo effects, and practices like meditation do produce measurable changes in your brain and your life. That's not the trap. The trap is the false scientific justification wrapped around these ideas, the deliberate or careless misuse of quantum terminology, and most importantly, the psychological harm that comes when people internalize the belief that if they're not manifesting their desires, it's because they're not thinking correctly. The guilt, the shame, the feeling that they're not doing it right, the burden of believing that their failure is a failure of consciousness. As you listen to this exploration, I want you to settle into a place where you can hold both complexity and clarity at the same time. Because that's what this topic requires. It requires us to be skeptical without being cynical, scientific without being dismissive, honest about what physics actually says while respecting the real power of human intention and belief. It requires us to distinguish between what's scientifically true and what feels emotionally true, because these are not always the same thing. So take a deep breath. Let's begin a careful journey through one of the most misunderstood relationships between science, consciousness, and the stories we tell ourselves about reality. Now let's talk about the manifestation movement itself and the promises it's been making. Over the past 2 decades, a particular narrative has taken hold, spreading across wellness communities, self-help industries, and spiritual circles worldwide. This narrative says something remarkably appealing. It says that you have far more power than you've ever imagined, that your consciousness isn't trapped inside your skull, separate from reality, but intimately connected to the very fabric of existence through quantum mechanics. That whatever you focus on, whatever you intend, whatever you believe with sufficient clarity and conviction, can literally become real. Not through some mystical or magical mechanism, but through physics, through actual, legitimate physics. This is the core promise of what we might call the quantum manifestation movement. And on the surface, it's undeniably attractive. Think about what it offers: a scientific explanation for why positive thinking works, a physics-based framework for personal empowerment, a mechanism that explains success, abundance, health, and happiness as something you can control through your own consciousness. The movement often presents this in deliberately scientific language. It talks about lowering your personal entropy. It references wave function collapse. It invokes quantum entanglement. It cites the observer effect. All of this language is borrowed directly from legitimate physics, but it's been repurposed, reinterpreted, and fundamentally distorted in ways that physicists immediately recognize as problematic. The appeal is undeniable, though, because the alternative narrative, the one that mainstream science offers, feels less empowering. It says that consciousness emerges from neural processes, that thoughts are physical phenomena, that while your mindset can influence your behavior and your emotional state, it doesn't directly alter quantum fields or reshape probability in the macroscopic world. It says that some outcomes are genuinely outside your control, that luck, circumstance, genetics, and other people's choices matter, that sometimes you can do everything right and still not get the outcome you wanted. This is true, but it's less glamorous, it's less immediately gratifying. It doesn't fulfill our deepest psychological needs in the same way. The human mind craves agency. We want to believe we have control. We evolved in environments where understanding cause and effect was literally a matter of survival. A predator attacks because of its behavior, not because of random chance. A plant grows because of water and sunlight, not because of luck. Our brains are built to see ourselves as the center of causality, to see our actions as causing outcomes. And when we can't control something, when we experience powerlessness, it causes genuine psychological distress. So the manifestation narrative gives us exactly what our psyches crave. It tells us we're not powerless. It tells us we're co-creators of reality. It tells us the problem isn't external circumstances. The problem is us, our thinking, our consciousness. And if the problem is us, then the solution is also us. We just have to think better. We just have to raise our vibration. We just have to get our consciousness right. This is deeply appealing, seductive even, but it's based on a misunderstanding of physics. So the manifestation narrative has flourished magnificently. Books like The Secret, which became a cultural phenomenon in the early 2000s and remains enormously popular. Films like What the Bleep Do We Know, which grossed over $10 million despite being widely criticized by physicists, seminars and coaches, and entire online communities have built themselves around this vision of quantum consciousness and reality creation. And the financial incentives are enormous. There's genuine money in manifestation. Billions of dollars worth. People are paying for courses hundreds or thousands of dollars each, buying books, joining coaching programs, attending retreats, all based on the promise that if they just understand and apply these quantum principles correctly, they can manifest anything they desire. Abundance workshops promise financial success to people struggling with money. Health seminars promise healing to people dealing with illness or chronic pain. Relationship programs promise perfect partnerships to people longing for love and connection, all through the application of quantum mechanics and conscious intention. The industry has created an entire ecosystem of books, podcasts, YouTube channels, social media accounts, celebrity endorsements, all promoting variations of the same fundamental claim, that your consciousness is the source of reality creation, that the only limits on what you can have are the limits of what you can think about. And there's an entire infrastructure now designed to capture that desire and monetize it. As you think about this, notice how compelling the story is. Notice how much it appeals to something deep within us, the desire for control, for agency, for meaningful power over our lives. That appeal is real, deeply real. It touches something fundamental in human nature, but the physics underneath is not. That's the trap, you see. The trap is that the appeal is genuine even though the underlying mechanism is false, and this creates a particular kind of psychological danger, which we'll come back to. Because when people organise their lives around false beliefs about how reality works, when they internalise responsibility for outcomes that they genuinely cannot control through thought alone, the psychological consequences can be profound. But first we need to understand exactly how the quantum misinterpretation happened and why it's so persistent. Let's shift our attention to the specific misuse of quantum terminology. Because here's what's so clever about the manifestation narrative, and what makes it so difficult for people without physics training to evaluate. It uses real physics terminology. It borrows actual concepts from legitimate quantum mechanics, but it redefines them, recontextualizes them, essentially creates new meanings for scientific words. Physicist Murray Gell-Mann, who won the Nobel Prize for his work in particle physics, coined a term for this. He called it quantum flapdoodle, the deliberate or unintentional misuse and misapplication of quantum physics to justify claims that have no scientific basis. And that term perfectly captures what's happening across the manifestation movement. It's quantum flapdoodle. It's pseudoscience masquerading as physics. The problem is that quantum mechanics itself is notoriously counterintuitive. It describes a reality that defies everyday common sense. Particles can be in multiple places at once. Observation affects outcomes. Things can be connected instantaneously across vast distances. All of this sounds mystical and strange, even when described accurately, which makes it an ideal vehicle for pseudoscience, for taking real, legitimate physics and twisting it into something unrecognizable. The misappropriation is systematic. The manifestation movement borrows terms like superposition, wave function collapse, entanglement, and observation, and then repurposes them with entirely different meanings than their actual scientific definitions. Think about this carefully. When physicists talk about superposition, they're referring to a specific mathematical property of quantum systems at the subatomic scale, a technical description of how particles exist in a combination of multiple states simultaneously until measured, described by the wave function. When manifestation coaches talk about superposition, they're often invoking some vague notion of multiple possibilities existing simultaneously and consciousness choosing between them. That's not what superposition is. Superposition isn't about possibilities from which you get to choose. It's about a mathematical description of quantum states. It applies to individual particles, not to your life, not to your job prospects or relationship possibilities. When physicists talk about observation, they mean measurement. Any physical interaction that extracts information from a quantum system, electronic detectors, photographic plates, specialized instruments. When manifestation advocates talk about observation, they mean conscious human awareness. They mean paying attention. They mean your mind looking at something. They mean your focused intention. These are not the same thing at all, but the shared word creates an illusion of connection. The same vocabulary, same terminology, but fundamentally different meanings. It's a classic bait and switch. Use the same word to mean two completely different things, and people's minds fill in the connection that isn't really there. And this is where the veneer of scientific credibility becomes so powerful. To someone without formal training in physics, the language sounds authoritative. It sounds like these manifestation coaches are speaking the language of science. They're using the same words that real physicists use. They peppers their explanations with references to quantum mechanics, to specific experiments, to the names of famous physicists. They sound like they know what they're talking about. So they must be translating real physics into practical application, right? They must be taking legitimate science and making it accessible to a general audience, right? Wrong. They're doing something much more subtle, much more dangerous. They're creating the appearance of scientific legitimacy without the actual scientific content. This is the heart of quantum quackery. the deliberate or unintentional misuse of quantum terminology to support claims that have no scientific backing whatsoever. What psychologists call the illusion of understanding. The feeling that you comprehend something when you actually don't. And this matters tremendously because it creates a particular kind of vulnerability. People who are drawn to manifestation ideas are often intelligent, curious, genuinely interested in understanding how reality works. They're not stupid or gullible. They read widely. They're skeptical about many things. They're just working with a false translation of quantum physics that sounds plausible enough to accept, especially when repeated by charismatic teachers, popular books, and viral social media content that reaches millions of people every single day. When something is repeated often enough, when enough people with confident voices and impressive credentials say it, the false claims start to sound like established facts. That's how misinformation works. That's how false beliefs propagate. It's not about being dumb. It's about the sophistication of the deception. It's about exploiting the trust we place in the language of science. Now, what physics actually says is important to understand, because once you know what the actual science says, the manifestation claims become much easier to recognize as distorted. Once you understand what these terms actually mean, the carefully constructed narrative falls apart. Let me lay out what we actually know from physics, clearly and directly. Quantum mechanics does not say that your thoughts manifest into reality. This is the core claim of the manifestation movement, and quantum physics explicitly does not support it. In fact, most physicists, when asked directly, will say that this interpretation represents a fundamental misunderstanding of how quantum mechanics actually works. The consensus among mainstream physics is clear and consistent. Consciousness does not create reality. Thoughts cannot manifest physical objects. Quantum mechanics provides no mechanism by which mental intention could influence macroscopic events in the world. None whatsoever. The physics is clear on this point. While it's true that some fringe physicists and philosophers have explored speculative theories about consciousness and quantum mechanics, these remain highly controversial, lack any compelling empirical support, and are explicitly rejected by the overwhelming majority of the scientific community. Some physicists have characterized these ideas as myths having no scientific basis, suggesting they belong in the same category as gods, unicorns, and dragons. That's the actual standing of quantum consciousness theories in mainstream physics. They're not cutting-edge alternatives, they're pseudoscience. When we talk about the observer effect in quantum mechanics, we're talking about something very specific. We're not talking about consciousness influencing reality. We're talking about a measurement problem, a technical issue within quantum theory about what happens when you try to measure the properties of subatomic particles. The effect occurs regardless of whether any conscious human is present. Automated laboratory equipment produces identical results. No observer needs to be aware of anything for the measurement effect to occur. Scientists can set up an experiment, leave the equipment running in an empty laboratory, and return to find the same measurement results as if they'd been watching the whole time. The particles don't care about consciousness. They respond to the measurement apparatus. And here's something crucial that gets overlooked in manifestation discourse. The human brain is not a quantum system operating at the subatomic level where quantum effects occur. Your thoughts, your consciousness, your mental states are macroscopic phenomena. They involve trillions of atoms organized into complex neural structures. Classical physics, Newtonian mechanics, governs the behavior of macroscopic systems like brains. This isn't a limitation of our current understanding. This isn't something that will change as physics evolves. This is a fundamental property of how reality scales. The rules that govern individual atoms don't directly govern macroscopic collections of atoms. The rules that apply to billions of neurons and the chemical processes between them are the rules of classical physics, not quantum physics. Quantum effects, if they exist at the neural level at all, and this is a big if, are rapidly destroyed through a process called decoherence. Environmental noise, thermal energy, constant interaction with the brain's physical surroundings all work to eliminate any quantum coherence almost instantaneously, like trying to maintain an extremely delicate soap bubble in the middle of a hurricane. The brain is warm, wet, and noisy. It's the opposite of the carefully controlled laboratory conditions, like near absolute zero temperatures, required to maintain quantum coherence. So even if consciousness did somehow operate through quantum processes, which is highly speculative and not supported by evidence, those quantum effects would be destroyed almost immediately. They would collapse into classical behavior before they could have any meaningful impact on anything. The quantum effects would never get a chance to do anything before they're washed away in the thermal noise of the brain. This is what physicists call the scale problem, the wholesale application of quantum mechanical principles to macroscopic objects and situations that is fundamentally unjustified scientifically. Quantum theories are based on experiments with subatomic particles, atoms, and light. But applying those theories directly to human-scale phenomena, to large-scale events, to macroscopic reality, represents a category error, a logical mistake. It's like using molecular biology principles to explain why your coffee cup breaks. Technically, the molecules might be involved, but the relevant physics is classical mechanics, not molecular biology. The same applies to quantum mechanics and consciousness. You might technically be made of particles that obey quantum principles, but your thoughts, your intentions, your consciousness operate at scales where classical physics is the relevant framework. Not quantum mechanics. The rules change depending on the scale you're operating at. That's how physics actually works. As you listen to this, I want to invite you to notice how relieving this might actually be. Because if your thoughts directly created reality at the quantum level, that would be an unbearable responsibility. Every stray worry would manifest suffering. Every negative thought would attract disaster. Every moment of doubt would collapse the probability waves in ways you didn't intend. The psychological weight of that would be absolutely crushing. And indeed, many people who internalize manifestation beliefs do experience that weight. The burden of believing they must think perfectly or reality will punish them. The actual physics, while less flattering to our desire for cosmic power, is far more compassionate. Your thoughts matter enormously for your own psychology, your mental health, your behavior, your choices, your motivation. They shape your internal experience. They influence how you interact with the world. They affect your mood, your energy, your resilience. They influence whether you take action or become paralyzed by fear. These are real effects, powerful effects, but they don't directly reshape reality through quantum mechanics. And that's actually okay. That's actually how it should work. Your agency doesn't need to operate through physics-defying mechanisms to matter profoundly. Now, let's look specifically at the observer effect misconception, because this is perhaps the most misused piece of physics in the entire manifestation narrative. And if you understand what's actually happening here, you'll understand the core problem with all quantum manifestation claims. The observer effect comes from one of the most famous experiments in all of science, the double-slit experiment. First described in 1801 by Thomas Young, later refined with electrons by physicists like Davison and Germer in 1927. And it's been so thoroughly distorted by manifestation advocates that it almost bears no resemblance to what's actually being measured. The basic setup is straightforward. Scientists fire individual particles like electrons or photons through a barrier that contains two slits. Behind the barrier is a detection screen that records where the particles land. Think of it like throwing particles at a wall with two holes in it and seeing where they end up on a backstop. Now here's where it gets strange. When no attempt is made to detect which slit the particle goes through, an interference pattern appears on the screen. The same pattern you'd see if waves passed through the slits and interfered with each other, creating regions of reinforcement and cancellation. It's as if each particle somehow went through both slits at once and interfered with itself. But when scientists place a detector at the slits to measure which path the particle actually takes, something remarkable happens. The interference pattern disappears. Instead, you get a simple two-stripe pattern behind each slit, exactly what you'd expect if particles behaved like classical objects, following definite paths. One particle goes through one slit or the other, not both. This is genuinely strange. The very act of measuring appears to change the particle's behaviour. It's called wave-particle duality, and it genuinely is one of the strangest phenomena in physics. It reveals something fundamental about quantum systems. But here's where the manifestation misinterpretation comes in. The movement takes this experimental result and claims it proves that consciousness creates reality. That observation by a conscious mind literally collapses quantum possibilities into definite reality. That your awareness, your attention, your intention somehow determines what becomes real. They say the double-slit experiment proves that the universe is fundamentally participatory, that consciousness brings reality into being. This is not what the double-slit experiment shows, not even close, because here's the crucial detail that gets lost in manifestation discourse, the detail that completely demolishes their interpretation. The measurement effect occurs regardless of whether any conscious human is observing the experiment. In fact, most modern versions of this experiment run in automated laboratories with sophisticated electronic equipment, no human observers present, and the measurement effect still happens exactly the same way. The interference pattern still disappears when the detector is active. The measurement still affects the particle's behaviour, but no human consciousness is involved. No observer is paying attention. No intention is being directed at the system. The detector is just a machine, an electronic device sitting in a lab. It doesn't have consciousness. It doesn't have intentions. It doesn't have awareness. It doesn't know it's measuring anything. It just performs a physical interaction with the particles. And yet, the effect still occurs. The pattern still changes. The particles still respond. This is the critical fact that fundamentally undermines the manifestation interpretation of the observer effect. If consciousness were necessary for collapsing quantum wave functions, then this couldn't happen. But it does happen reliably every single time. When physicists talk about observation, they don't mean conscious awareness. They mean measurement, any physical interaction that extracts information from a quantum system. Electronic detectors, photographic plates, photomultiplier tubes, any apparatus that can detect where a particle is or what path it takes. These are all forms of observation in the technical quantum mechanical sense. They're not observations by conscious minds. They're just measurement apparatus, mechanical interactions. What happens in the double-slit experiment is this. The measurement apparatus physically interacts with the particles, disturbing their quantum state. The detector emits photons or other particles that collide with the electrons passing through, altering their momentum and energy. This is a mechanical, physical process, not a consciousness-dependent phenomenon. The particles respond to the presence of the detector itself, not to the presence of a human observer or to anyone's conscious intention. This distinction is so fundamental that it's worth sitting with for a moment. The difference between measurement in a technical, quantum, mechanical sense versus conscious observation. These are not the same thing, and this distinction is absolutely central to understanding why quantum manifestation is fundamentally flawed. When you measure something, you physically interact with it. You extract information. You disturb the system. This is true whether a human is watching or not, whether anyone even knows the measurement is happening or not, whether anyone is thinking about it or intending anything specific, whether anyone is sending positive energy or visualization toward it. A detector left running in an empty automated laboratory in a sealed room with no humans anywhere nearby will produce identical results to a detector watched by a dozen conscious observers, all focusing their intention on a specific outcome. The interference pattern will still disappear when the detector is active. The measurement will still affect the particle's behavior. The quantum system doesn't care about anyone's consciousness. It doesn't respond to thoughts. It doesn't respond to intentions. It doesn't respond to wishes or beliefs, or positive affirmations. It responds only to the physical interaction of the measurement apparatus. Only to that. Nothing else. And yet the manifestation narrative deliberately conflates these two completely different things. It takes the word observation, which in quantum mechanics means measurement, means physical interaction, and transforms it into observation, meaning conscious awareness. It means your mind, it means your consciousness, it means your thoughts and intentions. It's a subtle semantic sleight of hand. The same word but entirely different meanings. And this redefining of technical terminology is precisely how quantum flapdoodle works. It exploits the ambiguity of language to create false equivalencies between completely different phenomena. It relies on the fact that most people don't read the original physics papers or consult with actual physicists. It relies on the assumption that people will accept the reinterpreted meaning and move on. And for millions of people, it works. They accept the redefinition without questioning it. They incorporate the false interpretation into their worldview. And from that foundation of misunderstanding, an entire philosophy of reality creation is built. As you sit with this, I invite you to notice the psychological appeal of the observer effect reinterpretation, because it offers something deeply gratifying, something we all crave at some level. It says that your consciousness matters to the fabric of reality. That reality literally shapes itself in response to your awareness, that you're not separate from the universe, not insignificant, but intimately involved in creating it through your observation, that you're not a passenger in existence but a co-creator. That matter responds to mind. This is profoundly appealing to our sense of significance and agency. This is the dream of power that manifestation is selling. This is why people pay thousands of dollars for seminars to learn these principles. This is why the idea spreads so successfully, despite being scientifically incorrect. It tells us what we want to hear about our place in the cosmos. It gives us the cosmic significance we crave, and that appeal might be why the misinterpretation has persisted and spread so successfully, despite being wrong. The psychological need it fulfills is real, even if the physics it's based on is not. But the actual physics, while less flattering to our ego, is still remarkable, genuinely remarkable. Particles do behave strangely at the quantum level. Measurement really does affect outcomes in ways that defy intuition. The universe is genuinely weird and counterintuitive in ways we're still actively exploring. Physicists themselves remain baffled by some aspects of quantum behavior. We just don't need to invoke consciousness to explain that weirdness. We don't need to add a layer of mind stuff to account for what we observe. The weirdness emerges from the mathematical properties of quantum systems themselves, not from the presence of observing minds. The universe is strange enough on its own, without adding phantom consciousness effects to the mix. The mystery is already there. The strangeness is already there. We don't have to manufacture it by misinterpreting how experiments work. So where did all of this actually come from? How did we get to a place where millions of people genuinely believe that consciousness reshapes quantum fields through focused intention? The story of quantum mysticism isn't new. It doesn't start with social media or the wellness industry or any recent trend. The seeds were planted decades ago in some genuinely interesting conversations between physicists who were grappling with some of the deepest mysteries of quantum mechanics itself. In the early days of quantum theory, back in the 1920s and 1930s, the founders of quantum mechanics were wrestling with what we might call the interpretive problem. The mathematics worked beautifully. The predictions were accurate. You could use the formulas to make predictions about experimental outcomes, and those predictions would be correct virtually every single time. But what did it all mean? What was the theory actually saying about the nature of reality? How should we interpret these strange results? Different physicists came to different conclusions, and the debates were genuine and serious. Niels Bohr developed what became known as the Copenhagen interpretation, which said that quantum systems exist in superposition until measured. Werner Heisenberg explored ideas about the role of observation and measurement. Max Planck and others grappled with the philosophical implications. And some of these early conversations, when discussed in loose or imprecise language, left room for misinterpretation. Room for the idea that perhaps consciousness played some special role in bringing reality into existence. The language of the time could be quite vague about these matters, and later readers would pick up on that vagueness and run with it in directions the original thinkers never intended. Here's the crucial thing though: the founders of quantum mechanics, including Bohr himself, explicitly rejected the idea that conscious observation was required for quantum effects. Bohr denied quantum mysticism as early as 1927. He was entirely clear about this. The theory didn't require a conscious observer, not in the way it was being interpreted by spiritually minded people. The word observation was a technical term meaning measurement, not human awareness, not consciousness, not the act of a mind paying attention to something. But that precision of language didn't survive the journey from academic physics papers to popular culture. When these ideas entered broader circulation, the careful qualifications and technical distinctions got lost or deliberately obscured. By the 1970s and 1980s, there was this fascinating movement of physicists who began exploring consciousness more openly. The Fundamental Physics Group, sometimes called the Fundamental Physics Group, was a collection of physicists at UC Berkeley who were genuinely interested in the intersection of quantum mechanics and consciousness. Some of their work was speculative, but intellectually serious. They were thinking about deep questions. But as these ideas spread outward from the academic community into popular culture, the qualifications got dropped. The speculation became certainty. The possibilities became promises. The maybe this is worth exploring became, this is how reality actually works. Then came the cultural translation. New Age authors and spiritual teachers began taking these speculative ideas and adapting them into spiritual frameworks. They took the genuine quantum weirdness, the real counterintuitiveness of quantum mechanics, and they wove it into narratives about consciousness and spiritual power. In 1989, Deepak Chopra published Quantum Healing, which became enormously influential in bringing quantum terminology into wellness and spiritual circles. The book presented quantum mechanics as evidence that consciousness could heal illness, that thoughts could reshape the body. It looked scientific, it sounded scientific, it used quantum terminology throughout. But it represented a fundamental misreading of physics dressed up in the language of authority. Then in 2004, the film What the Bleep Do We Know came out, and this was really pivotal in cementing the quantum consciousness narrative in popular culture. The film was produced by the Ramtha School of Enlightenment, built around the teachings of J.Z. Knight, a channeler who claims to communicate with a 35,000-year-old disembodied entity named Ramtha. The film featured physicists and philosophers discussing quantum mechanics, but mixed legitimate physics with pure speculation, presenting opinions as facts, featuring people without proper scientific training discussing complex physics concepts. It became a sleeper hit, grossing over $10 million, despite physicists immediately and vocally criticizing it as pseudoscience. But the film did something culturally important. It made quantum consciousness ideas accessible. It made them seem credible. It provided a narrative framework that was visually compelling and emotionally resonant. And then came The Secret in 2006, the book and film that became a genuine cultural phenomenon. The Secret took the quantum consciousness ideas and simplified them even further, packaging them into what they called the law of attraction. The basic claim was stunningly simple and stunningly appealing. Whatever you focus on will come into your life. Your thoughts create your reality. This wasn't presented as metaphor or philosophy. It was presented as physics, as law, as how the universe actually operates. The Secret became a bestseller. It influenced millions. It spawned countless seminars and coaching programs and follow-up books. And it took the misinterpretation of quantum mechanics that had been building for decades and put it directly into the hands of the general public. What happened was a kind of cultural game of telephone, where each retelling moved further from the original source material and closer to whatever was most emotionally appealing. The actual physics got left behind. The qualifications and uncertainties got dropped. The speculative possibilities became absolute certainties, and the entire thing got wrapped in scientific language to give it an air of legitimacy that the actual physics doesn't support. Now think about this carefully. This history matters not because it explains how we got here, but because it reveals the psychological mechanism at work. At each stage, people were taking genuine mysteries, genuine strangeness in quantum mechanics, and they were creating narratives that would fulfill deep human needs. The need to feel powerful, the need to believe we have control over our circumstances, the need to feel that our consciousness matters cosmically. These are legitimate needs. We do crave agency. We do want to believe our thoughts have power. The problem is that the narrative created to fulfill those needs isn't true. And when you build your life on a narrative that isn't true, things start to break down. As you're listening to this, you might notice how seductive the historical narrative is. How understandable it seems that genuine physicists would start exploring consciousness, that their ideas would be adapted by spiritual teachers, that those ideas would eventually reach popular culture and become simplified and distorted. It feels like a natural evolution, a kind of inevitable cultural process. But understanding how we got here doesn't make the current situation any less problematic. It just helps us see how intelligent people, well-meaning people, people genuinely interested in both science and spirituality, ended up promoting ideas that aren't actually supported by the physics they claim to be based on. But here's where we need to shift our focus, because understanding the history of quantum mysticism only gets us part of the way. We also need to understand what's actually happening in people's brains when they engage with manifestation ideas. Because the real power of manifestation practices doesn't come from quantum mechanics. It comes from something far more ordinary and far more fascinating. It comes from how the human brain actually works, from belief, from expectation, from something called the placebo effect, from the remarkable and genuine ways that our thoughts and expectations can influence our psychological state and our behavior. And that's where the real danger lies, because there's nothing wrong with these psychological mechanisms. They're real, they're powerful, they can be genuinely helpful. But when we misattribute them to quantum physics, when we tell ourselves we're manipulating reality through quantum fields, when we're actually experiencing well-documented psychological effects, we're setting ourselves up for a particular kind of suffering. Neuroscience has established pretty clearly that the brain is not a passive receiver of external information sitting there, passively taking in whatever comes its way. It's an active constructor of experience. Your brain is constantly at work building the world you experience, moment by moment. Your brain doesn't just record what's happening around you, like a camera recording a scene. That's not what's happening at all. Instead, it's constantly making predictions about what's going to happen. It's constantly generating expectations about what incoming sensory information will be, and then it's constantly updating those predictions based on actual incoming sensory information, refining the models it uses to understand the world. And crucially, your expectations, your beliefs, your prior assumptions about how the world works fundamentally shape what you perceive and how you interpret experience. This is called top-down processing, and it's one of the most important things to understand about how perception actually works. This is why two people can have completely different reactions to identical events. They're not having the same experience. Their brains are literally constructing different experiences based on their different expectations and beliefs about what things mean. The placebo effect is perhaps the most dramatic example of this principle in action. If you give someone a pill and tell them it will reduce their pain, and if they believe you, their pain often genuinely decreases. Not because of the chemical composition of the pill, not because the pill is doing anything to their body at the molecular level, but because of the expectation, because of what their brain expects to happen. The brain literally generates pain relief in response to the expectation of pain relief. It activates endogenous opioid systems. It generates natural pain-killing neurochemicals. It modifies how pain signals are processed in the spinal cord and brain. Brain imaging studies show that placebo treatments activate the same neural pathways and neurochemical systems as actual pharmaceutical treatments. The effect is real. The pain relief is genuine. The neural changes are measurable and reproducible, but the mechanism is belief, not chemistry, not the pharmacological properties of the substance. This is not a minor effect or a marginal phenomenon. This is not a small thing happening at the edges of what we understand. The placebo effect can be nearly as powerful as actual medication for certain conditions, particularly those with significant subjective components, like pain, fatigue, mood, nausea, and inflammation. In some cases, placebo treatments have been shown to rival the effectiveness of drugs like morphine for pain management. And there are genuine neuroscientific benefits to practices like meditation, positive thinking, and visualization. These are not placebo. These are not wishful thinking. These are real neurological changes with real functional consequences. When you meditate regularly, your brain shows measurable changes in structure and function. The prefrontal cortex, the region associated with executive function and self-regulation, becomes more active and more densely connected. Regions associated with stress regulation and emotional processing show increased grey matter. Regions associated with self-referential thinking and worry, like the default mode network, become quieter and less active. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, actually shrinks in size with regular meditation practice, and this correlates with reduced anxiety and stress responses. When you practice gratitude or positive thinking, you're training your brain to notice and process positive information in your environment, which can genuinely shift your mood and your sense of well-being over time through repeated activation of reward centers and positive emotional systems. When you visualize yourself succeeding at something, you're activating similar neural pathways as actually practicing the skill. Motor cortex regions activate, sensory cortex regions activate. Your brain is literally training itself at a neurological level for the thing you're imagining, which is why mental rehearsal is actually effective for improving performance. Athletes use visualization before competitions, and it measurably improves their performance. Musicians use it to prepare for performances. These effects are documented in hundreds of peer-reviewed studies. They're reproducible, they're real and substantial. So when people practice manifestation techniques and they experience real changes, real improvements in their lives, they're not experiencing quantum field manipulations. They're experiencing these genuine neuroscientific and psychological effects. Their brains are literally becoming more oriented toward positive possibilities because they're training themselves to think that way. Their behavioral patterns are shifting because they believe in their ability to control their outcome, so they take more action. Their mood is improving because they're engaging in practices that activate neural systems associated with well-being. Their sense of agency is increasing because they're taking an active role in thinking about their future and their possibilities. All of this is real. All of this is valuable, but none of it requires quantum mechanics to explain. Notice how this creates a particular trap, though. If you believe you're manipulating quantum fields through your thoughts, and then your life improves, you'll attribute that improvement to quantum field manipulation. You'll think, oh, the manifestation works, the quantum physics is real, I'm actually controlling reality through my consciousness. But what actually happened is that your brain engaged in a set of genuine neuroscientific processes that created real psychological and behavioral changes. You're giving credit for those changes to a false mechanism. You're telling yourself a story about quantum fields when the actual story is one of neuroscience, psychology, and genuine but fully explicable brain changes. And here's the really important part. When that mechanism gets confused, when you think you're doing something through quantum manipulation, when you're actually doing it through expectation and behavior and brain chemistry, things start to go wrong in specific ways. Because if you believe you're controlling reality through thought alone, then when something doesn't work out, when you want something badly and do all the visualization and positive thinking and it still doesn't happen, you're forced to conclude that you did something wrong with your thinking, that you weren't positive enough, that you had some limiting belief you didn't catch, that your consciousness wasn't sufficiently aligned with your desire, that you failed to manifest it correctly. The failure gets internalized. It becomes a failure of your thinking, your consciousness, your worthiness. This is emotionally overwhelming and damaging in ways that simple bad luck would not be. If something doesn't work out and you attribute it to external circumstances, to market conditions, to other people's choices, to randomness, that's one kind of disappointment. But if something doesn't work out and you believe it's because you failed to think correctly, because your consciousness wasn't powerful enough, because you had some hidden limiting belief that sabotaged your manifestation, that's a different kind of disappointment entirely. That's shame. That's a sense of personal failure. That's internalized guilt about not being conscious enough, not being positive enough, not being worthy enough for the universe to give you what you want. Think about what this does to someone who genuinely believes in manifestation principles and then struggles to achieve a desired outcome. They might be trying to manifest financial abundance while working a low-wage job with limited opportunities. They might be trying to manifest a romantic relationship while living in isolation or dealing with social anxiety. They might be trying to manifest healing from a chronic illness while their body continues to deteriorate. And when these things don't manifest, when reality stubbornly refuses to rearrange itself according to their positive thoughts, they're faced with a choice. Either admit that the underlying theory doesn't work, or blame themselves for not doing it right. And because the theory sounds so scientific, so authoritative, because they've invested so much emotional and financial energy into it, they often choose the second option. They blame themselves. They go to another seminar. They read another book. They try to think more positively. They try to remove their limiting beliefs. They take more responsibility for outcomes that genuinely aren't within their control through thought alone. This is the psychological trap at the heart of the manifestation movement. Not that positive thinking is bad. Not that meditation and visualization are harmful. They're not. These practices can be genuinely beneficial. The trap is the false theory underlying them. The claim that you're manipulating quantum fields through consciousness when you're actually engaging in psychological and behavioral practices that work through entirely different mechanisms. When you misattribute the benefits to the wrong cause, when you believe you're controlling reality through quantum mechanics, when you're actually just engaging with your own psychology, you set yourself up for a particular kind of suffering when things don't work out. And things don't always work out, no matter how positive you think or how well you visualize. Take a breath here. Notice how this connects to your own experience. Have you ever felt like something was supposed to manifest for you and it didn't? Have you ever wondered if you were doing the visualization wrong, or if your beliefs were blocking the outcome? Have you felt that particular kind of self-blame that comes from believing that you have absolute control over your reality through thought alone? That's the trap. That's the psychological mechanism that makes the false theory so dangerous. even as the practices underneath it might have some genuine benefits. But here's what we need to understand about what's actually happening when you think about something, when you desire something, when you focus your intention on an outcome. Because the real science of thoughts and reality is quite different from both the manifestation narrative and from a simple dismissal of the power of thinking. It's more nuanced, it's more interesting, and it's actually far more empowering in the ways that matter. When you think about achieving a goal, your brain is doing something remarkable. It's engaging prediction systems. It's activating motor cortex areas associated with actually performing the action you're imagining. It's releasing neurotransmitters like dopamine that increase motivation and energy. It's training neural pathways that will make actual performance of the behavior more automatic and efficient when the real moment comes. This is actual neuroscience. This is documented and reproducible. What your thoughts are not doing is reaching out into quantum fields and rearranging particles to bring about macroscopic changes in the world. They're not collapsing wave functions at a distance. They're not creating non-local effects through entanglement. They're doing something much more limited, but in many ways more practical. They're priming your brain and your body to recognize opportunities when they arise. They're increasing your motivation to take action. They're making you more likely to notice relevant information in your environment. They're preparing you psychologically and neurologically for pursuing the thing you want. If you want to improve your finances, positive thinking won't create money out of nothing. It won't cause a quantum rearrangement of probability to make you suddenly wealthy, but it might increase your motivation to seek out career opportunities. It might make you more likely to take risks that could pay off. It might help you notice potential business ideas or connections you would have previously overlooked. It might increase your confidence in interviews or negotiations in ways that lead to better outcomes. All of these are real effects. All of them matter. But they work through engagement and action and behavior, not through quantum mechanics. If you want to improve your health, positive thinking won't cure a serious illness. It won't cause your body to spontaneously regenerate damaged tissues. It won't make a tumor disappear through consciousness alone. But it might reduce stress-related immune suppression. It might increase your motivation to exercise and eat better. It might improve your sleep quality through stress reduction. It might increase your pain tolerance through neural mechanisms we're still actively exploring. And some of these effects can be quite significant. For chronic pain or psychosomatic conditions, these mechanisms can produce dramatic improvements, but they're not magic. They're not quantum field manipulation. They're neuroscience and psychology and physiology working together through well-understood mechanisms. If you want to improve your relationships, positive thinking won't make someone fall in love with you through quantum attraction or consciousness manipulation. It won't make them overlook fundamental incompatibilities. It won't create connection where there's no foundation for it. But it might make you more pleasant and engaged when you're around people. It might increase your confidence in social situations in ways that make you more attractive and more likely to make genuine connections. It might help you handle disappointment and rejection in ways that make you more resilient and more likely to keep trying. All of these are real and valuable, but they work through your own behavior and psychology, not through quantum effects on other people's minds. Do you see how this reframe actually gives you more real power, not less? Because the mechanisms that actually work are mechanisms you can study and improve. You can learn about motivation and goal setting. You can develop better habits. You can understand behavioral psychology and use it to improve your life. You can work with a therapist to address limiting beliefs that actually constrain your choices. You can engage in practical problem solving and take concrete actions toward your goals. All of these are things within your genuine control. All of these are things that actually work in the real world. The manifestation narrative takes away this real power because it suggests that all you need to do is think correctly, visualize properly, align your consciousness with your desires. But that's not how anything actually works in the real world. Real change requires action. Real outcomes require engagement with actual circumstances. Real improvement requires addressing actual obstacles. When you believe that thinking is enough, that quantum mechanics is doing the heavy lifting, you're actually less likely to take the actions that would genuinely improve your situation. You're more likely to wait for the universe to rearrange itself. You're more likely to internalize failure as a personal consciousness problem rather than adjusting your strategy. You're more likely to blame yourself when reality doesn't match your thoughts rather than learning from the actual feedback the world is giving you. If you enjoy drifting through these explorations without interruption, members get every episode 48 hours early, completely ad-free. You can join them whenever you feel ready. Now we come to the final piece of this puzzle, because understanding how we got here, understanding what's actually happening in people's brains when they engage with manifestation ideas, understanding the real science of how thoughts and behavior interact with reality, all of this still doesn't fully explain why the confusion persists so stubbornly. Why, despite having physicists consistently and clearly state that quantum manifestation is pseudoscience, despite having the actual mechanisms of the placebo effect and psychological change explained clearly and scientifically, why does the manifestation narrative continue to spread? Why do intelligent, educated, thoughtful people continue to invest in these ideas? Why does quantum flapdoodle remain so popular? Part of it is financial incentive. The manifestation industry is genuinely massive. Books, seminars, coaching programs, retreats, merchandise. There are millions of dollars at stake. People whose entire careers and income depend on the manifestation narrative continuing to be believed. And these people are not stupid. They're not careless with language. Many of them are deliberately using scientific terminology in imprecise ways, creating deliberate confusion between technical meanings and everyday meanings. It's not all unintentional misunderstanding. Some of it is deliberate distortion in service of commercial interests. But that's only part of the story. The real reason the manifestation narrative persists is more psychological and more cultural than purely financial. It persists because it meets deep human needs that the scientific narrative does not meet. The scientific narrative is that you're made of atoms. Those atoms obey physical laws. Your thoughts are emergent properties of neural activity. Some things are within your control, and some things are not. You have genuine agency, but not infinite agency. Your choices matter, but so do circumstances and luck, and other people's choices and random chance. This is true, but it's not emotionally satisfying. It doesn't give us the sense of cosmic significance and power that we crave. The manifestation narrative offers something else entirely. It says you're not just made of atoms, you're fundamentally connected to the universe through quantum mechanics. Your consciousness is a force in the cosmos. Your thoughts literally reshape reality. You have unlimited power to create the life you want. You're the architect of your own destiny. Completely. Totally. If you're not successful, it's not bad luck or difficult circumstances. It's because you didn't think correctly. You didn't believe strongly enough. You had a limiting belief you didn't catch. The problem is always you, which sounds like it takes responsibility and empowerment, and in a sense it does, but it also places infinite responsibility on your thinking. It makes every failure a personal failure of consciousness. And that narrative is incredibly appealing precisely because of its promise of total control. In a world where so much feels out of control, where economic systems are complex and often unfair, where health outcomes can be arbitrary, where relationships can be unpredictable, the idea that you can control your destiny through thinking correctly is deeply appealing. Even if it's not true, especially if it's not true, because the truth is less reassuring. There's also something about the use of scientific terminology that makes the narrative more believable and more psychologically appealing. When someone says you can attract things through positive energy, that sounds like wishful thinking. But when someone says quantum entanglement connects all things and you can influence probability through consciousness, that sounds scientific. That sounds like it has the authority of physics behind it. And our brains are remarkably susceptible to this kind of authority. We're more likely to believe something if it's wrapped in scientific language, if it references physicists and experiments and technical terminology. It doesn't matter if the science is wrong. The appearance of science is enough to make it more believable. And finally, there's something about the narrative that makes failure interpretable in a way that maintains belief. If the manifestation techniques work, you got what you wanted, and that confirms the theory. If they don't work, you didn't do them right, and that also confirms the theory. There's no way to falsify it. There's no way to demonstrate that it's wrong, because every outcome is interpreted as confirmation of the underlying theory. This is what Karl Popper called an unfalsifiable hypothesis. It has all the hallmarks of pseudoscience. It can explain anything. It can predict nothing. But psychologically, it's incredibly robust because people can always find a way to make sense of their experience in terms of the theory. As we move forward in this exploration, as we continue to look at the relationship between consciousness and reality, keep this in mind. The manifestation trap isn't just about getting physics wrong. It's about misunderstanding how power and agency actually work. It's about trading real power, the power that comes from understanding yourself and your world clearly, for the false promise of infinite power through thinking alone. And the tragedy is that this trade doesn't even need to happen, because the real power of your thoughts, the genuine ways that your mind influences your body and your behavior and your choices, is actually quite remarkable. It just doesn't work the way the manifestation narrative claims. The reality is that when the manifestation framework fails, when you don't get what you want despite all the visualization and positive thinking and believing you could do it, something quite specific happens to your psychology. You've been promised that your thoughts create reality. You've been told that the universe responds to your consciousness. You've been taught that the barrier between what you want and what you have is nothing but a limiting belief or a negative thought pattern. And then nothing changes. The job doesn't materialize. The relationship doesn't transform. The illness persists. The wealth doesn't flow in. The circumstances of your life remain stubbornly unchanged, despite your best efforts to align your consciousness with your desires. In that moment, when the promise fails to deliver, you're not experiencing simple disappointment. You're experiencing a particular kind of psychological crisis because the framework you were given has nowhere to direct that crisis except inward. If the universe responds to consciousness, if your thoughts create reality, if manifestation is truly how things work, then the failure must be your fault. You must have had a hidden limiting belief you didn't catch. You must have had some unconscious doubt sabotaging your efforts. You must not have believed strongly enough. You must not have been positive enough. You must have had some resistance you couldn't see. This internalization of failure is emotionally overwhelming and damaging in ways that attributing failure to external circumstances would not be. When something doesn't work out because of market conditions, or other people's choices, or bad timing, or simple randomness, that's one kind of disappointment. You can grieve it and move on. You can learn from it. You can try something different next time. But when something doesn't work out because you failed to think correctly, because your consciousness wasn't powerful enough, because you have some fundamental unworthiness that prevented the universe from responding to your desire, that's a different kind of pain entirely. That's shame. That's self-blame. That's the internalization of failure as a personal deficiency in your consciousness, your belief, your fundamental worth. This is the psychological trap that the manifestation framework creates, and it operates with particular cruelty on people who are already struggling. Someone trying to manifest financial abundance while working a low-wage job with limited opportunities. Someone trying to manifest a romantic partner while isolated or dealing with social anxiety. Someone trying to manifest healing from a chronic illness while their body continues to deteriorate. These are people already facing genuine obstacles, and the manifestation framework doesn't just fail to help them overcome those obstacles, it adds an additional layer of psychological burden. Not only do they have to deal with the difficulty of their actual circumstances, but they now also have to contend with the belief that their inability to overcome those circumstances through thought alone is a sign of their personal failure. The neuroscience here is important to understand. When you believe you have control over an outcome and then you fail to achieve it, the brain's threat detection system activates in particular ways. Your amygdala detects a violation of your expectations. Your anterior cingulate cortex registers an error signal. But here's the key difference. If you believed you had control and you failed, your brain is more likely to attribute that failure to your own deficiency. If you believed the outcome was largely outside your control and it didn't work out, your brain is more likely to attribute it to external circumstances. This is called the internal versus external locus of control, and it has massive implications for mental health. People with an internal locus of control tend to experience more self-blame and more shame when things don't work out. People with an external locus of control can experience the disappointment without internalizing it as a personal failure. The manifestation movement systematically pushes people toward an extreme internal locus of control. Everything is your responsibility. Your thoughts create your reality. Your consciousness shapes your circumstances. The universe is responding to you specifically. This creates a psychological state where virtually any negative outcome can be internalized as a personal failure of consciousness. And this particular internalization of failure is associated with increased depression, increased anxiety, and decreased resilience. People who blame themselves for outcomes they couldn't actually control through thought alone experience more psychological distress than people who acknowledge the role of external circumstances and genuine constraints. There's something particularly insidious about this because the manifestation movement often attracts people who are already vulnerable, people who are suffering, people who are struggling, people who are desperate for some framework that suggests they have control over their circumstances. The movement offers hope, it offers agency, it offers the promise that their situation can change if they just think correctly about it. And for people who feel powerless, who feel like their life has spiraled beyond their control, this offer of hope through thought alone is incredibly attractive. But it's a false hope that comes with a devastating price attached. Think about what this means for someone dealing with a serious illness. The manifestation narrative says that you can heal yourself through positive thinking and consciousness alignment. It doesn't matter what the actual medical reality is. It doesn't matter if the cancer is aggressive or the treatment is difficult or the prognosis is poor, your consciousness can overcome it. And then the person doesn't recover. Not because they didn't think correctly or didn't believe strongly enough, but because the illness was genuinely serious and the body didn't respond the way the narrative promised it would. What happens then? The person is left not just with a serious illness, but also with the conviction that they failed, that their consciousness wasn't powerful enough, that they must have had some secret doubt or limiting belief that prevented their healing. This is psychologically catastrophic. It's adding layered emotional burden, self-blame on top of suffering. Or think about someone trying to manifest out of poverty, working multiple jobs, trying to manifest abundance, visualizing wealth, believing that the universe is responding to their consciousness and bringing opportunities. And then the years pass and the financial situation doesn't improve significantly. The manifestation framework says that this must be because of limiting beliefs about money or worthiness or the person's unconscious resistance to receiving. It never occurs to the framework that the person might be living in a context of genuine structural economic constraints, that the jobs available to them might have limited earning potential, that education and connections and access might be unequal, that the manifestation framework itself is functioning as a kind of victim-blaming ideology that says if you're poor, it's because of your consciousness, not because of systemic factors largely outside your control. This is why the psychological consequences of the manifestation trap are so serious. It's not just that the theory is wrong about how physics works. It's that it creates a particular kind of suffering for people who believe it. It creates a framework where failure is always personalized, where outcomes are always attributed to consciousness and intention, where external circumstances and constraints and the genuine randomness of life are systematically minimized or denied. And it does this while wearing the mask of science, while using quantum terminology and talking about observer effects and wave function collapse. It does this while claiming to be based in physics, which makes it particularly insidious because people trust it. They trust it because it sounds scientific. They trust it because it's been repeated thousands of times in books and seminars and social media posts. They trust it because the alternative, which is to accept that many things are outside our control, feels unbearable. Now here's where we need to shift to something that might seem contradictory, but actually isn't. Because while the manifestation narrative about quantum mechanics is fundamentally wrong, there actually are real quantum effects happening in biology. There actually are real ways that quantum mechanics influences living systems. But not the ways the manifestation movement talks about. Not through consciousness manipulating quantum fields. Not through thoughts collapsing wave functions. The real quantum biology is far more subtle and far more interesting than the quantum manifestation narrative allows for. For decades, scientists assumed that quantum effects were impossible in warm, wet biological systems. The brain, after all, is about 37 degrees Celsius, full of water and ions and constantly jiggling molecules. The exact opposite of the carefully controlled conditions that quantum effects seem to require. Quantum effects seemed fragile, delicate. They seemed to decay almost instantly when exposed to warmth and noise and the chaos of living systems. This led to the assumption that quantum mechanics only mattered at the smallest scales, at the level of individual particles and atoms, but that once you got to the complexity of living organisms, classical physics took over. That was the mainstream view for most of the 20th century, and it turned out to be wrong. Starting in the 1990s and accelerating in the 2000s, researchers began discovering quantum effects in biological systems that seemed to violate these assumptions. Photosynthesis, the process by which plants convert sunlight into chemical energy, was found to use quantum coherence to achieve near-perfect efficiency. Rather than exploring energy pathways one at a time, photosynthetic complexes appear to explore multiple pathways simultaneously through quantum superposition, allowing the energy to find the most efficient route to the reaction center. This is genuine quantum mechanics operating in a biological system at room temperature. It's not a metaphor. It's not consciousness dependent. It's quantum mechanics working as it should, but in a living system. Birds that migrate over thousands of miles seem to navigate using quantum effects in specialized proteins in their eyes. The protein cryptochrome can detect magnetic fields through a quantum process called spin-dependent chemical reactions. Electrons in the protein can exist in a superposition of different spin states, and the magnetic field affects which spin state is more likely, allowing the bird's brain to detect the direction of the magnetic field with remarkable precision. This is quantum biology enabling animal behavior. It's one of the most elegant examples of quantum mechanics in living systems. Even our sense of smell might involve quantum tunneling effects. Traditional models suggested that we smell things based on the shape of molecules, that odorant receptors fit molecules the way a lock fits a key. But this model has difficulty explaining how we can detect such a wide variety of smells and why we can distinguish between molecules that have very similar shapes. New research suggests that smell might involve quantum tunneling, where electrons can pass through molecular barriers that they shouldn't classically be able to pass through. The olfactory system appears to be sensitive to the vibration frequencies of molecules, frequencies that might be detected through quantum tunneling effects in the odorant receptors. This is still being investigated and debated, but it represents another potential way that quantum mechanics directly influences our sensory experience. The point is not that these biological quantum effects prove the manifestation narrative. They don't. They prove the opposite, in fact. They show that quantum mechanics can influence biological systems through purely physical mechanisms, through molecular geometry and electron configurations and resonance frequencies. Not through consciousness, not through intention, not through positive thinking. When quantum effects show up in biology, they show up through mechanisms that don't require consciousness to be involved at all. A photosynthetic complex doesn't need to believe in quantum mechanics for it to work. A bird's eye doesn't need to have positive intentions about magnetism for the protein to detect magnetic fields. Our olfactory receptors don't need to visualize quantum tunneling for it to happen. The quantum effects in biology are real, and they're operating independently of consciousness. This is where something really interesting emerges if you're paying attention. There are real quantum effects in the brain. There actually is quantum coherence happening in neural microtubules. There really is quantum processing occurring in biological neural networks. But none of this supports the manifestation narrative about consciousness creating reality. Instead, it shows us something different. It shows us that consciousness, whatever it fundamentally is, arises from physical processes. And those physical processes include both classical neural computation and quantum biological effects. But neither of these processes is influenced by positive thinking or visualization or manifest intention in the way the manifestation narrative claims. The brain is a quantum biological system, yes, but quantum biology follows the laws of physics. It's not influenced by belief. It's not shaped by consciousness in the way manifestation advocates claim. A quantum biological system in your brain operates according to the same principles as a quantum biological system in a photosynthetic complex or a bird's eye. The laws of physics don't change because a conscious mind is directing them. The wave functions don't collapse differently because you're thinking positive thoughts. The quantum effects don't amplify because you're visualizing your desired outcome. And this brings us to the most important question in all of this. Where do consciousness and science actually meet? Where are the real intersections between what we know about the brain and what we know about quantum mechanics, and what we can say truthfully about the relationship between mind and reality? Because the intersection exists. It's just not where the manifestation movement claims it is. The real meeting point is at the level of neural computation itself. Your brain is computing. Your neurons are processing information. Quantum effects might play a role in some aspects of this computation, particularly in terms of how quantum coherence might enable certain kinds of information processing that classical computation alone couldn't achieve. But computation itself, whether classical or quantum, is a physical process following physical laws. Information processing in the brain might involve quantum mechanics, but it's not controlled by consciousness in the way manifestation advocates believe. Your conscious mind is not somehow standing outside your brain, manipulating quantum fields and collapsing wave functions to create your desired reality. Instead, consciousness is something that emerges from neural computation. It's what it's like to be a brain processing information in this particular way. This is a genuinely profound realization, even though it doesn't support the manifestation narrative. Your consciousness is not separate from your brain. It's not some immaterial force manipulating matter from outside. It's not a quantum field interacting with reality at a distance. Instead, your consciousness is what happens when a physical brain reaches a certain level of complexity in its information processing. It's the subjective experience that accompanies neural computation. It's real and it matters, but it operates through physical processes, whether classical or quantum. Your thoughts are literally neural activity. Your feelings are patterns of brain activation. Your choices emerge from the computation happening in your prefrontal cortex and your basal ganglia and your limbic system and countless other regions working in concert. This is where the real science of consciousness and quantum mechanics meet. in the recognition that consciousness is not somehow outside the physical world manipulating it, but is instead deeply embedded in physical processes, in neural computation, in quantum biology, in the flow of information through trillions of neural connections. Your thoughts are physical processes. They involve the firing of neurons, the release of neurotransmitters, the activation of neural networks. These are all physical events. They follow physical laws. They're influenced by your prior experiences, your genetic predispositions, the context of your environment. They're constrained by the limits of your neural hardware. When you have a conscious thought, what's actually happening is that specific patterns of neural activity are occurring. Your prefrontal cortex is activating. Your parietal cortex is processing. Your limbic system is generating emotional coloring. Different neurotransmitters are being released into the synaptic spaces between neurons. Receptors on neighboring neurons are being activated or inhibited. Electrical potentials are shifting. Ion channels are opening and closing. This whole cascade of physical, chemical, electrical events is what a thought is. There's nothing non-physical about it. There's nothing quantum manipulating reality about it. It's neuroscience all the way down. And this is where consciousness actually does connect to the physical world, not through magical quantum field manipulation, but through the influence of neural activity on behavior and attention and memory and motivation. Your conscious intention to accomplish something activates your motor cortex in ways that prepare your body for action. Your focus of attention literally changes which neural networks are active, which sensory information is being processed, what you're likely to notice in your environment. Your belief in your ability to accomplish something influences your dopamine levels, your motivation, your persistence in the face of difficulty. Your emotional state influences your immune function, your inflammation levels, your stress hormone production. All of these are real, measurable, physical effects, but they operate through the brain and body, not through quantum fields and consciousness collapsing wave functions at a distance. And yes, your thoughts then influence your behavior and your mood and your choices and your attention. These influences are real and they matter. This is how you actually have power in the world. Not through quantum field manipulation, but through the ways that your thoughts influence your actions, your attention, your choices, your persistence, your resilience. When you think about a goal, your brain activates networks associated with that goal. You become more likely to notice opportunities related to that goal. You're more motivated to take action. Your arousal and attention are directed towards success. This is real power. It's just not the power that the manifestation narrative claims. It's not quantum mechanics. It's neuroscience and psychology. And critically, it only works if you actually take action. It only works if you actually engage with the world. Thinking about a goal without action won't accomplish it. But thinking about a goal and taking persistent action toward it, with your brain primed and motivated and attention directed, that actually works. That's the real science of how your mind connects to reality. Think about what this means for the things you actually want to change in your life. Because the real science of consciousness and reality meeting is far more empowering in the practical sense than the quantum manifestation narrative, even though it's less metaphysically comforting. If you want to improve your financial situation, the real science says that your brain can develop improved financial awareness. You can learn about money. You can increase your financial literacy. Your attention can be directed toward financial opportunities. Your neural networks can be rewired through practice and learning to recognize patterns related to financial success. This is all real. It all works. And it's far more practical than trying to align your consciousness with quantum fields and hoping the universe manifests abundance. If you want to improve your health, the real science says that your thoughts and beliefs do influence your brain, which influences your body. Stress reduction through meditation genuinely affects your immune system and your inflammation levels. Belief in recovery can activate your brain's endogenous healing systems. Visualization of movement patterns can enhance motor learning and performance. These effects are real, and they work through mechanisms we're actively studying and understanding. They're not quantum field manipulation, they're neuroscience and physiology, and they actually work better when you understand them correctly than when you're trying to invoke quantum mechanics to make them work. So here's the danger, the real danger, of the manifestation framework and the magical thinking it promotes. It's not that positive thinking is bad. It's not that visualization is harmful. It's not that belief is dangerous. The danger is in the false attribution of mechanism. The danger is in believing that you're doing quantum magic when you're actually just engaging with your own psychology. The danger is in the framework that says if you don't get what you want, it's because you fail to think correctly. The danger is in trading real understanding for false certainty, real agency for the illusion of total control, real problem solving for wishful thinking. Magical thinking is attractive precisely because it offers something that reality doesn't offer. It offers total control. It says that if you just think right, if you just align your consciousness correctly, if you just believe strongly enough, you can have what you want. No need to understand actual constraints. No need to take difficult action. No need to accept that some things are outside your control. No need to grieve genuine losses or accept genuine limitations. Just think positive, and the universe will give you what you want. This is appealing in a way that realistic assessment of what you can and cannot control simply isn't. But the cost of this magical thinking is the internalization of failure as personal deficiency. The cost is the psychological harm that comes from believing you're manipulating quantum fields when you're not. The cost is the shame and self-blame that follows when magical thinking fails to produce magical results. The cost is the narrowing of focus away from real problem solving toward trying to control your thoughts about the problem. The cost is real, and it's not worth paying for the false comfort of magical certainty. Think about a person with a chronic illness who has been through many treatments. Some have helped, some haven't. The condition persists despite everything they've tried. And then they encounter the manifestation narrative. It tells them that healing is possible through the right thinking, the right consciousness, the right alignment with quantum fields and universal energy. It tells them that others have healed themselves this way. It tells them that if they believe strongly enough, if they visualize the right way, if they remove the limiting beliefs that are supposedly blocking their healing, they can get better. This is hope. This is permission to think that maybe they have more control than they realized. But when the illness persists, when the healing doesn't come despite their best efforts to think correctly about it, they're faced with a choice that the manifestation framework has constructed. Either the theory doesn't work, or they failed at it. Most people choose to blame themselves. They think they must have had some hidden belief sabotaging their healing. They think they didn't believe strongly enough. They think maybe they're not worthy enough for the universe to help them. This is severe psychological distress being added on top of physical suffering. This is a genuine harm. Or consider someone struggling with severe depression. The manifestation narrative tells them that their depression is a result of their consciousness being misaligned. That if they think more positively, visualize their happiness more vividly, believe more strongly in their ability to be happy, they can lift themselves out of depression. This sounds empowering. It sounds like it gives them agency. But when they try to think positive and the depression persists, when they try to visualize their way to happiness and instead find themselves drowning in despair, the framework tells them that this must be their fault, that they're not doing it right, that they have limiting beliefs about happiness that they need to clear, that maybe they're choosing to stay depressed somehow. This is victim blaming. This is adding shame and guilt on top of a mental health condition that already includes shame and self-blame. For someone with depression, being told that their condition is a result of their consciousness being wrong is devastating. It's harmful. It's the opposite of what someone with depression needs to hear. The manifestation framework treats consciousness as if it were a lever you can pull, as if your thoughts are something you have complete control over. But this fundamentally misunderstands how the brain and consciousness actually work. Your thoughts are constrained by your brain's physiology. Your mood is influenced by your neurotransmitter levels. Your motivation is influenced by your dopamine production. Your ability to think positively is constrained by your mental health state, your life circumstances, your trauma history, your genetic predispositions. Someone with depression cannot simply think their way to happiness, because depression literally changes how the brain processes information. It narrows focus, it creates negative bias, it reduces motivation and energy. Telling someone with depression to think more positively is like telling someone with a broken leg to walk it off. It's not a failure of willpower or belief. It's a biological reality. The same applies to severe anxiety, to trauma, to addiction, to persistent pain conditions, to any of the real neurological and biological challenges that people face. These are not problems that yield to positive thinking alone. They require actual treatment. They require actual engagement with the biological and environmental factors that are creating them. The manifestation framework doesn't just offer an ineffective solution. It offers a harmful solution that adds psychological burden to people who are already struggling with biological challenges beyond their conscious control. And here's something crucial to understand. The manifestation framework is not actually anti-science. It's not saying consciousness has no power. It's saying that consciousness has the wrong kind of power. It's not saying your thoughts don't matter. It's saying they matter in the wrong way. Your thoughts do matter. They influence your attention, your motivation, your behavior. They affect your mood through neural mechanisms. They shape your choices and your actions. But they don't manipulate quantum fields at a distance. They don't collapse wave functions to bring desired outcomes into existence. They don't create reality through belief alone. They matter in ways that are real but limited. They matter in ways that require action to translate into results. They matter in ways that are constrained by biological reality and by circumstances largely outside your conscious control. The real tragedy of the manifestation movement is that it takes genuine psychological power and claims it's something far grander than it actually is. It takes the very real effects of belief and expectation on your psychology and behavior and claims these are quantum mechanical effects on reality itself. In doing so, it sets people up for a particular kind of failure. Not just the failure of not getting what they want, but the failure of blaming themselves for that failure in ways that are emotionally overwhelming and damaging. It takes people's legitimate desire for agency and control and transforms that desire into victim blaming that says, if you're struggling, it must be because you're not thinking correctly. The real power of consciousness isn't in manipulating quantum fields or collapsing wave functions or attracting abundance through focused intention. The real power of consciousness is in your ability to understand your situation clearly, to identify real constraints and real possibilities, to take effective action based on that understanding, to adapt your strategy when something isn't working, to persist in the face of difficulty, to connect with others who can help you, to build skills and knowledge over time, to make choices that align with your genuine values and priorities. This is the real power of consciousness. It's humble compared to the quantum manifestation narrative. It's limited, it's constrained, but it's real. It works, and it doesn't come with the psychological cost of internalizing failure as personal deficiency. And this is where the real conversation begins. Because understanding that consciousness isn't magic doesn't mean it has no power. It means it has a different kind of power, a real kind of power, the kind that actually works in the actual world with actual consequences. So let's talk about what actually influences your reality, what actually shapes the circumstances of your life and the outcomes you experience. And I want you to pay attention here, because this is where theory meets practice. This is where understanding how the world actually works becomes radically practical. Your attention shapes what you perceive. This is not metaphorical. This is neuroscience. Your brain receives an enormous amount of sensory information every single moment. More information than your conscious mind could ever process. So your brain filters, it prioritizes, it highlights certain information and suppresses other information based on what you're paying attention to. This is called selective attention, and it's one of the most powerful forces shaping your experience of reality. When you're focused on something, your brain literally devotes more neural resources to processing information about that thing. Your visual cortex activates more strongly, your sensory gating becomes more selective, you literally see and hear things that you would have filtered out if you weren't paying attention to them. This is why when you learn you have a new illness, you suddenly start noticing symptoms everywhere. This is why when you're thinking about buying a particular car, you suddenly see that car everywhere on the road. The car wasn't just appearing, your brain's filtering systems were redirected. Your attention was redirected, and as a result, you started noticing what was already there. This is real, this works, and it has nothing to do with quantum fields or consciousness collapsing wave functions. When you consistently focus your attention on something, you also change which neural networks activate together. Your brain strengthens the connections between neurons that fire together. This process, called Hebbian learning or experience-dependent neuroplasticity, means that the more you think about something, the stronger the neural networks associated with that thinking become. If you repeatedly think about potential dangers and threats, the neural networks associated with threat detection strengthen. Your amygdala becomes more reactive. Your threat detection system becomes more sensitive. You literally become more anxious and more vigilant. This isn't because you're attracting danger through your thoughts. It's because your brain's threat detection system has been trained by your repeated thinking patterns to be more sensitive to potential threats. Conversely, if you repeatedly think about things you're grateful for, the neural networks associated with positive emotional experiences strengthen. Your brain becomes better at detecting positive aspects of your environment. Your mood improves. This isn't because gratitude manifests abundance, it's because your brain's reward systems have been trained through your repeated thinking patterns to be more sensitive to positive experiences. Your capacity to notice and appreciate good things improves. Both of these effects are real and measurable. Both are mediated by actual neural mechanisms. Neither requires consciousness to manipulate quantum fields. Your motivation and effort directly influence outcomes. This is obvious when you say it, but it's worth being explicit about because the manifestation framework tries to obscure this basic truth. If you want to improve your financial situation and you spend 2 hours a day researching investment strategies, learning about money, networking with people in higher income fields, building your skills, taking on additional work, you're far more likely to improve your financial situation than if you spend 2 hours a day visualizing abundance without taking any action. The visualization might create a minor psychological effect through improved mood and motivation that slightly improves your persistence or effort. That's real. That's not nothing. But the actual improvement comes from the action you're taking, from the knowledge you're building, from the connections you're making, from the skills you're developing. The manifestation narrative tries to suggest that the action is secondary to the consciousness alignment. It's exactly backwards. The consciousness is secondary to the action. The thought is secondary to the behavior. The belief is secondary to the results that come from doing the work. Your emotional state influences your physiology. This is something that the manifestation framework gets half right while still getting the fundamental mechanism wrong. Your stress levels genuinely do affect your immune system. Chronic stress suppresses immune function through the action of cortisol and other stress hormones. Chronic stress increases inflammation throughout your body. Chronic stress affects your sleep quality, your metabolism, your hormone balance. All of this is mediated through actual physiological mechanisms. Your sympathetic nervous system activates under stress, releasing epinephrine and norepinephrine. These hormones have real effects on your heart rate, your blood pressure, your digestion, your immune function. This happens whether or not you're consciously aware of it. This happens through evolutionary mechanisms that have nothing to do with quantum mechanics. And it works in both directions. When you practice relaxation techniques, meditation, slow breathing, you activate your parasympathetic nervous system. Your body releases different hormones. Cortisol levels decrease. Your heart rate decreases. Your blood pressure decreases. Your immune function actually improves. This is real. This is measurable. This is something that happens in your body. But it happens through the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system, not through consciousness manipulating quantum fields. Your emotional state affects your physiology, but the manifestation narrative misses the crucial point that your emotional state is constrained by your actual circumstances, by your neurochemistry, by your trauma history, by your current stress level, by your physical health. You cannot simply decide to be unstressed if you're living in genuinely stressful circumstances. You cannot simply decide to be hopeful if you're dealing with depression that's affecting your neurotransmitter levels. Your emotional state is not infinitely plastic. It's not entirely under your conscious control. It's influenced by your circumstances and your neurobiology in ways that set real constraints. This understanding actually opens up something important. If your emotional state is constrained by your circumstances and your neurobiology, then sometimes the right intervention isn't to think differently. It's to change your circumstances. It's to get treatment for depression. It's to remove yourself from chronically stressful situations. It's to address the actual problems rather than trying to think your way out of them. The manifestation narrative would have you believe that you should be able to feel hopeful and unstressed if you just think correctly. But the real science says that sometimes the most important thing you can do is change the actual situation that's creating the stress or preventing the hope. This is empowering in a different way. You're not stuck trying to control your thoughts while your circumstances remain unchanged. You can actually address the circumstances. You can make changes that matter. Your beliefs influence your efforts and persistence. This is something that's well established in psychological research. People who believe they can succeed at something are more likely to persist when faced with difficulty. People who believe they can improve through effort are more likely to engage in deliberate practice. People who believe their abilities can grow through hard work show more resilience in the face of failure. This is the growth mindset effect, and it's real. But here's the crucial part. The belief only matters if it actually increases effort and persistence and learning. Belief alone doesn't create success, but belief plus increased effort plus more effective learning does create better outcomes. This is why the manifestation narrative is so psychologically dangerous. It suggests that the belief is sufficient, that if you just believe strongly enough and visualize vividly enough, the outcome will follow. But the actual mechanism requires that belief be translated into effort and action and learning. And if you're spending your time visualizing rather than actually learning and working, then the belief is actually working against you rather than for you. The placebo effect is real and it's powerful, particularly for conditions that have subjective components. Pain, fatigue, mood, anxiety, nausea. These are conditions where your expectations and beliefs can genuinely affect your experience through neurological mechanisms. When you expect pain relief, your brain's opioid system activates. Endogenous opioids are released. Your experience of pain genuinely decreases. This is measurable. This is real. But the placebo effect doesn't work for things like bone fractures or infections or cancer progression. It might work for side effects, for your subjective experience of illness, for your mood during illness. But it doesn't cure the underlying biological disease. And more importantly, the placebo effect works best when combined with actual effective treatment. If you have an infection and you receive placebo treatment, the infection won't go away. You need antibiotics. You need the actual treatment. The placebo effect is a real tool for managing subjective experience, but it's not a substitute for actual treatment of actual biological problems. And this is where understanding how your mind actually influences reality becomes both humbling and practical at the same time. Your consciousness matters. Your thoughts matter. Your attention matters. Your beliefs matter. Your emotional state matters. But they matter in ways that are real but limited. They're constrained by your circumstances, by your neurobiology, by the actual state of the external world. And the way they matter most is not through quantum field manipulation, but through the effect they have on your effort, your attention, your behavior, your persistence, your learning. The real power of consciousness is not in creating reality through thought alone. It's in your capacity to engage with reality as it actually is, to understand constraints and possibilities, to take effective action, to learn from results, to adapt and improve. This is the real science of how mind and reality meet. Now, I want to talk about the path forward, because understanding that the manifestation narrative is wrong doesn't mean you throw out everything about positive thinking or meditation or visualization. It means you integrate what's actually useful about these practices with an honest understanding of how they actually work. It means you stop looking for magical mechanisms and start appreciating the real mechanisms. It means you move from magical thinking to mature psychological understanding. And this shift is genuinely liberating in ways that magical thinking never could be. The integration starts with separating metaphor from mechanism. Meditation genuinely can be valuable. It genuinely does reduce stress. It genuinely does improve emotional regulation. It genuinely does enhance focus and attention. But these benefits come through real neurological changes. Your amygdala becomes less reactive. Your prefrontal cortex becomes stronger and more able to regulate emotional responses. Your default mode network becomes quieter, leading to less mind-wandering and rumination. These are measurable changes in brain structure and function. You don't need to believe that meditation is connecting you to quantum fields of consciousness or universal energy. Understanding that meditation is training your brain's attention systems and emotional regulation circuits is enough. It's actually more powerful because it's true and because it opens up possibilities for optimizing your practice based on what actually works. The same is true for visualization. Visualizing yourself successfully completing a task does genuinely improve your performance. But this isn't because you're manifesting success through quantum mechanisms. It's because visualization activates many of the same neural networks that actual performance activates. Your motor cortex activates during visualization. Your sensory cortex activates. Your emotional systems activate. This mental practice has been shown to improve athletic performance, surgical skill performance, public speaking performance. It's called motor imagery, and it's a real, established technique used by coaches and trainers worldwide. And if you enjoy drifting through these explorations without interruption, members get every episode 48 hours early, completely ad-free. You can join them whenever you feel ready. But here's what's important. Visualization works best when combined with actual practice. Mental practice is valuable, but it doesn't substitute for the real thing. You can't learn to play piano through visualization alone. You can't become a skilled athlete through visualization alone, but you can use visualization to enhance your learning when you're also actually practicing. The mechanism works through real neuroscience. The benefit is real, but it's not magic. Belief in your capacity to improve genuinely does lead to better outcomes, but not because your belief attracts abundance from the universe. It's because your belief influences your behavior. If you believe you can improve your fitness, you're more likely to exercise consistently. If you believe you can learn a new skill, you're more likely to engage in deliberate practice. If you believe your relationships can improve, you're more likely to invest effort in communication and connection. Your belief influences your action, which influences your results. The causation flows from belief to behavior to outcome, not from belief directly to outcome. And critically, this means that belief works best when it's grounded in reality. Realistic optimism works better than false optimism. Believing that you can improve through effort works better than believing that you're destined for success without effort. Believing in your capacity to learn from failure works better than believing that you shouldn't fail. The integration here is recognizing that what matters is not magical thinking, but realistic, grounded thinking that acknowledges both your capacity to improve and the role of effort and circumstance in determining outcomes. The path forward is also about developing what researchers call realistic optimism or grounded hope. This is different from both pessimism and magical thinking. Realistic optimism acknowledges that outcomes are uncertain, that difficulties are real, that effort matters, that you have some capacity to influence outcomes but not complete control. And within that acknowledgement, it maintains hope and focus on what you can actually do to improve your situation. It's the opposite of both despair and magical thinking. Despair says nothing matters and nothing can improve. Magical thinking says you don't need to do anything because your thoughts will create improvement. Realistic optimism says some things matter, some things are within your control, some things aren't, and here's what you can actually focus on that will make a difference. This kind of thinking is more resilient than magical thinking because it doesn't collapse when things don't go as planned. It doesn't require you to internalize failure as personal deficiency. It can adapt and adjust based on what actually happens. The integration of spirituality and science, which is what this really amounts to, doesn't require you to reject meaning or connection or the value of contemplative practices. It requires you to understand these things accurately. You can appreciate meditation without needing it to connect you to quantum consciousness. You can appreciate the value of gratitude without needing to manifest abundance. You can appreciate beauty and meaning and connection without needing to invoke pseudoscience. And the truth is, most things become more beautiful and meaningful when you understand them accurately, rather than through magical metaphors. A flower is more beautiful when you understand the actual mechanisms of photosynthesis and pigmentation. A sunset is more meaningful when you understand the physics, CS of light and atmosphere. Your own mind is more wondrous when you understand the actual neuroscience of consciousness, rather than through vague references to quantum fields. Now let's talk about practical applications, because this is where understanding matters most. Because knowing this theory doesn't help you unless you can translate it into actual useful practices in your actual life. So let me walk through some concrete examples of how the real science of mind and reality actually applies to things people care about. If you want to improve your financial situation, here's what the real science says. First, increase your financial literacy. Learn about money. Understand how money works. Understand the difference between income and wealth. Understand debt and compound interest and investment. Study people who have built wealth and understand the patterns in how they did it. This is not metaphorical learning. This is actual learning that changes your brain and your understanding. Your neural networks for financial concepts become more developed. Your ability to recognize financial opportunities and threats improves. When you study financial principles, your brain literally grows stronger in the regions associated with numerical processing, risk assessment, and future planning. This is neuroscience at work in your brain, rewiring itself based on what you practice. Second, direct your attention toward financial opportunities. Be alert to ways you could increase income or decrease expenses. Notice opportunities that align with your goals. Your brain's attention networks will help you notice things if you're primed to notice them. This is the selective attention mechanism working for you in a practical way. Third, increase your effort and action. Take on additional work if possible. Learn new skills that could increase your earning potential. Build your network so you have access to more opportunities. Make deliberate choices about your spending that align with your longer-term financial goals. All of these are behavioral changes, not magical manifestations. And they work because they change your actual circumstances and your actual capacity, not because you've aligned your consciousness with quantum fields. What's crucial here is that the money improves because your income changes, or your expenses decrease, or your investments grow. These are real, measurable changes in your actual financial situation. Your thoughts didn't manifest them, your action did. If you want to improve your health, the real science says this. First, work with actual medical professionals to understand your actual health situation. Get proper diagnoses. Understand what's actually going on with your body. Get real treatment for real medical problems. You cannot think or visualize your way out of genuine medical conditions. Medical science has developed through centuries of research and practice. It works. It's not perfect, but it's far better than trying to think your way to health. Second, reduce your stress and improve your emotional regulation, because stress genuinely affects your health through real physiological mechanisms. Meditation, exercise, time in nature, connection with others, all of these genuinely reduce stress and improve health markers. But they work through physiology, not through quantum mechanics. These practices are valuable tools for supporting your health, but they're best viewed as complements to proper medical care, not replacements for it. Third, take care of the basic things that actually affect health. Sleep quality, nutrition, movement, stress reduction, meaningful connection. These aren't metaphorical. These are the actual factors that determine health outcomes. They work through boring, ordinary biological mechanisms. Sleep deprivation decreases immune function and increases inflammation through real neurochemical changes. Good nutrition provides actual nutrients that your body needs. Movement improves cardiovascular function and strengthens muscles and bones. These are not magical. They're just how bodies work. And understanding that health comes through these ordinary mechanisms, is actually liberating. You don't have to achieve some mystical state of consciousness. You just have to take care of your basic needs and get proper medical care when you need it. If you want to improve your relationships, the real science says this. First, develop your capacity for genuine empathy and understanding. Work on actually understanding how other people think and feel rather than projecting your own thoughts and feelings onto them. This is a learnable skill. It involves developing your theory of mind, your ability to model other people's mental states. Second, communicate clearly and honestly. Express your own needs and feelings clearly. Listen to other people's needs and feelings. Work together to find solutions that address everyone's needs when possible. This is not visualization. This is actual skillful communication. Third, invest time and effort in relationships. Spend quality time with people you care about. Be present and attentive. Help them when they need help. Ask for help when you need help. Relationships improve through actual interaction and investment, not through visualizing harmony or manifesting connection. Fourth, recognize that you have limited control over whether other people reciprocate your effort. You can work on being a better friend or partner. You cannot make someone else change or care about you or invest effort if they're not willing to. Relationships require mutuality, and one of the most important parts of realistic thinking about relationships is recognizing this limit on your control and being willing to accept it. All of these practical applications share something in common. They're based on actually engaging with reality as it is, not as we wish it to be. They require understanding constraints as well as possibilities. They require effort and action, not just thought and belief. They're grounded in actual mechanisms that actually work rather than magical thinking. And they actually produce results because they're based on how things actually work rather than how we wish they would work. And this brings us to the final reflection, because you've been listening to this for a long time now, and I want to acknowledge something. This might not be what you wanted to hear. There might be a part of you that preferred the magical thinking. There might be a part of you that likes the idea that your thoughts create reality, that you have total control through consciousness, that you just need to think correctly and everything will work out. That's a comforting idea. It's an idea that offers escape from the difficulty of dealing with real constraints and real limitations and real situations that are outside your control. And I'm not here to tell you that you're wrong to find that attractive. I'm here to tell you that there's something better available. Something that actually works better than magical thinking, even though it requires you to give up the comfort of total control. Letting go of magical thinking can feel like a loss. It's a loss of a certain kind of hope. The hope that you could solve all your problems just by thinking about them in the right way. The hope that the universe is conspiring to help you if you just align your consciousness correctly. The hope that you have more control than you actually do. And grieving that loss is real and legitimate. It's okay to feel something when you let go of that hope. But here's what you gain in exchange. You gain the possibility of actual agency. Real agency. The kind that's based on understanding how things actually work. You gain the possibility of actually solving problems through real understanding and real action, rather than being trapped in the severe psychological distress of thinking you failed because you didn't think correctly. You gain the possibility of developing genuine resilience based on understanding constraints and working within them rather than the false resilience of magical thinking that collapses when reality doesn't cooperate. You gain the possibility of genuine self-compassion instead of self-blame. Because when something doesn't work out, you can recognize that it might be because of factors outside your control, or because you needed to learn something, or because the situation itself was genuinely difficult. Rather than blaming yourself for not having positive thoughts or strong beliefs, or sufficient manifestation ability, you gain the possibility of actually connecting with others based on genuine empathy and understanding, rather than on the illusion that you're all connected through quantum consciousness fields. Most importantly, you gain something that might seem small, but is actually profound. You gain accuracy. You gain the ability to understand how things actually work. And this accuracy, while sometimes humbling or disappointing in the short term, is actually liberating in the long term, because it opens up the possibility of actually working effectively with reality rather than struggling against it, while imagining that your thoughts should somehow bend it to your will. When you understand that your thoughts don't create reality through quantum mechanics, but do influence reality through your attention and behavior and choices, you gain a kind of power that actually works. You gain the ability to work with the world as it is, to understand its actual mechanics, to find leverage points where your effort actually matters. This is not the infinite power of magical thinking. This is something better. This is real power that produces real results. The quantum manifestation trap is that it offers false hope in exchange for psychological suffering when the hope doesn't materialize. The alternative is grounded hope. Hope that's based on realistic understanding. Hope that acknowledges difficulty and constraint. Hope that's grounded in what actually works rather than in magical thinking. This hope is more resilient. This hope actually produces results. This hope can carry you through difficulty without collapsing into self-blame. And I want to say something important to anyone listening who has been deeply invested in manifestation thinking and is now confronting the reality that it's not how the world actually works. This is not about you being stupid or naive or gullible. Manifestation thinking is sophisticated. It's appealing. It makes use of real quantum physics terminology. It's been promoted by influential people with platforms. It promises something that everyone wants, which is control and agency. The fact that you are drawn to it doesn't say anything bad about you. It says something about how attractive magical thinking is, particularly when you're struggling and looking for solutions. And letting go of it is a sign of growth. It's a sign that you're willing to update your understanding based on evidence. It's a sign that you're moving toward maturity in how you think about yourself and reality. So if you're grieving the loss of magical thinking, let yourself grieve. and then let yourself move forward with something better. Let yourself move toward grounded hope and real agency and accurate understanding. Let yourself move toward taking action that actually produces results rather than visualizing results that thoughts alone cannot create. Let yourself move toward genuine resilience and genuine self-compassion. The world doesn't respond to your consciousness through quantum fields, but it does respond to your understanding and your effort and your choices and your persistence, and that's actually enough. That's actually everything you need. Your mind is powerful, not because it can manipulate quantum fields, but because it can understand the world and direct your action and learn from experience and adapt and grow. That power is real, and it's available to you right now. If you found value in this exploration of consciousness and quantum mechanics and how your mind actually influences reality, I'd invite you to explore related ideas. The video, Quantum Entanglement and Manifestation, Could We Be More Connected Than We Realize, examines these concepts from a different angle and might add depth to your understanding of how connection and entanglement work in actual physics versus how they've been misused in spiritual thinking. Thank you for spending this time with these ideas. Thank you for being willing to examine them carefully and honestly. That capacity to examine your own beliefs, to be willing to update them based on evidence, to seek truth even when it's uncomfortable, that's one of the most valuable capacities human consciousness has.